Joe Biden announced an unprecedented plan to forgive all or a portion of student loan debt for 43 million eligible borrowers.
Whether or not he has the authority to do so goes before the Supreme Court tomorrow. 6 News' Brent Weber is taking a closer look.
An estimated 370,000 Nebraskans, 660,000 Iowans stand to receive $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan forgiveness if the U.S. Supreme Court agrees that President Joe Biden has the authority to grant it.
This is a game changer for so many people.
Joe Biden v. Nebraska is one of 2 cases on the subject that the Supreme Court will consider first thing Tuesday morning, the other brought by 2 students. While Mike Hilgers declined comment today, a spokesperson for the Nebraska AG said it's exciting to be in Washington at the center of this Supreme Court fight, along with Iowa's Brenna Bird and attorneys general from 4 other states.
This is a monumental case.
The High Court has set aside at least 2 hours to hear arguments. Frederick Lawrence from Georgetown School of Law says the outcome is hard to predict, but the president's argument is clear.
Nothing oblique here. This is clear language in a statute that says you can cancel debt, you can give debt relief in connection with a national emergency. I think the administration is going to argue that's precisely what they're doing.
That statute is the HEROES Act, created after 9/11 and now extended. It allows the Secretary of Education to waive or modify the terms of federal student loans as necessary in connection with a national emergency. The COVID-19 pandemic was deemed such an emergency by President Donald Trump in 2020.
It's not everything, but it would certainly help a lot and relieve a lot of that burden.
Especially if you're low income, first generation, sometimes the debt that you will have to take on can affect you and your family for years to come.
For a lot of people, it means the ability to, maybe not work 2 jobs.
People knew what they were doing when they signed it, and they should pay it off.
According to educationdata.org, Nebraskans currently hold $7.9 billion in student loan debt. Iowans, $13.2 billion. In both states, more than 12% of residents have student loans and more than 55% are under the age of 35. On your side in Omaha, Brent Weber, 6 News.
The Supreme Court generally issues a decision by the end of June on current cases. Until then, federal student loan payments will remain paused, and they would resume 60 days after a decision is made.